Yay, thank you. Welcome. I'm so glad you all are here. So just as a little refresher, both for people who have never been here before and for people who are tuning in to the archive footage, this is S2 on Air. S2 on Air is a response project, or part of our response project to COVID-19 and being remote, and wanting to publicize some of the conversations and the thoughts that are continuing to happen, that to show that we are not at a standstill, right? That the people who are doing the work are still doing the work, maybe even harder now. So S2 happens every other Tuesday at 3. Yeah, heck yeah. So I just want to do a land acknowledgement. And I want to acknowledge that not only are we on unceded Salish land, it is a place that has a long history of travel and successful cultural exchange and peaceful negotiation and strong stewardship and all of these social ideals that we uphold prior to the history of colonialist harm, which is still the dominant way of life. It is still by design used to oppress and silence Indigenous members of the community, who continue to maintain their sovereignty despite broken treaties and state violence and a denial of resources. I want to give a thank you to our colleagues and to attendees of Indigenous descent or identity for their resilience despite colonialist history and the vibrancy that they bring and maintain in our city and in all of our gatherings. Through all of our work, community empowerment, land stewardship, climate resilience are only possible when we uphold Indigenous knowledge and leadership. So please let us know how we can continue to forward that work and those determinations. And one way, as we all know, to support that is to put your money where your mouth is. So I'm gonna add a little link here to Real Rent Duwamish, which is the Tribe for the Duwamish Fund, and supporting them in their work locally in the Salish Sea, Seattle area. I'm gonna pop up in the chat. I'm gonna stick it on the event page as well.
And I wonder, Una, since we have guests who are from, we're convening this event from Coast Salish region and communities, but we have folks from all along the coast. So if you want to, we're not putting anybody on the spot, but if you have an acknowledgement you'd like to do from another community, I think we can make a little time for that. Does that sound good, Una?
Sounds great to me. Yeah, I want to open up the floor for anybody who wants to contribute.
In the Bay Area, we are occupying Ohlone land. So, yeah, acknowledge that for sure.
In San Diego on Kumeyaay land. So acknowledging them.
And I'll just acknowledge I'm outside of Seattle right now. And I understand, I'm not super familiar with this area, but I believe I'm on Shoshone land. And I'm excited to learn more about it.
Great. Thank you all. I appreciate it. So just as a little bit more context, also just like a little bit of a call during COVID. By supporting S2, you come in attending our events, traffic on our websites, donations that are tax deductible, or through getting some of our really sweet swag, and also by participating in our surveys. We are focusing more and more on the work that we do and trying to figure out what our niche is, what our position is in this city, and how can we not duplicate work, but create work that is useful and timely. And one of our history, both our history is Sustainable Seattle and our current times is data collection. And we are working on leaning into that in all sorts of ways. So one of those ways is through surveys. So I've, again, in the chat, I've included a link to our website, which has more information on our incubator hubs, who we are trying to support through COVID-19 as well as lots of links to our surveys. Those are regional surveys. One of them is a regional survey to sort of a hyper-local census is what we call it, to figure out where resources are, where they're going, especially during COVID. Because when we talk about resiliency, this is a perfect moment in time, right? To talk about resiliency, we are watching things crumble under pressure. And so this is where we want to get some of our information on the places that are crumbling the most, or the places that are not crumbling, that are absolutely getting what they need. So on that note, I have a little survey for all of us that is specific to today. It's 2 quick questions. If you guys want to pop in there as we start our conversation, it's about 2 minutes long. Let me know if you can get in there. And yeah, this survey is designed to be answered as many times as you have different questions to it. One of the ways I like to think about data collection is that everyone in our community is an expert, that their ideas about things is necessary information, right? Like even if somebody's wrong, or even if somebody doesn't have education that supports some of this information transfer, what they have to say and what they think gives us an idea and a picture of the community we're in, right? And the kind of knowledge resources that we have. So welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. It's very exciting to have guests from all over the West Coast. Yeah, take a minute to do that little survey. Feel free to pop back into it. And I would love to toss it over to Em.
Yeah, thank you, Una. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction to this group that's here today, and then we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. And we'll start with kind of our special guest, so to say. But then I'd also like to open it up to the folks who are listening in. We've done a few of these S2 on airs. We also sometimes call them open office hours. So these are conversations that we would likely otherwise be having as an organization that we want to open up to our community, as well as extend and kind of make pervious. Is that the word that I want? Yeah, the work that we're doing with folks from outside just this group of people who meet all the time. This is work that is broad-read and asks the participation of our whole region and community. So if you're listening in, you're welcome to just quietly listen in. We are essentially a group of colleagues and friends who chat on a regular basis, and we wanted to have our usual chat in an open format. And so we'd also love to invite you to be a part of the chat and part of the conversation. So if at any point today we're bringing up something that sparks something up in you and you're like, oh, I really relate to that, or like, oh, I have a question about that, please, 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 you are a part of this discussion. Any way that you choose to participate and show up here is the correct way. So that said, we're just going to start again with introductions. We'll start with the featured guests, the usual crew. But then I would also like all of the other folks who are attending today to introduce yourselves as well, so we know who you are. And I'm going to ask what your name is, what your location is. We're coming from all across the West Coast today. Your occupation or role, however you choose to define it, and a little prompt for you. And the prompt today is, since our relationship to place was changed so suddenly, what's something this week that reminds you where you are or keeps you rooted in your specific place, wherever you're coming from today? So your prompt, and I'll put in the box so you have it visually to reference. Just be ready to offer just a short little comment. It can just be one word. Since things have changed so suddenly with our relationship to place, what's something that reminds you where you are geographically, perhaps outside of wherever you've been sheltering these last few months? So I'll begin. This group is a group of, quote, placemakers, placekeepers, people who work with place in a myriad of ways, as you'll hear. I want to give a shout out to some of the folks who weren't able to join us this afternoon, especially Mariah Hoffman, who actually convened this kind of regular group that's been meeting remotely. Carmen Flores, who's come to a couple of our meetups. We met initially in person just about a year ago at a summit on creative placemaking on the Pacific Coast in the age of climate change in Los Angeles. We just kind of like hit it off. There was a group of us who were really compatible and kind of what we were looking for from this kind of gathering. we ended up meeting again, just kind of circumstantially a few months later in Phoenix. And then Mariah met Casey kind of since the COVID outbreak. Minori knew Erica from previous work. And so we've just used our kind of like core root of those of us who were synergistic in this work, meeting at these conferences to start to expand this network. And for about 2 months now, we've been meeting every Wednesday evening to have either wine or beer or tequila or whatever, or like lose some weight, like whatever we need at that moment, take walks together. And we just like convene and we talk about the things that we're facing in our own communities, the things that we're dealing with in our sectors, and providing just interpersonal support for each other. And as we've been meeting over these last couple months, we've talked about our mutual support, I find very tangible. But we've also asked, what does it look like to be working in different cities, but be doing this parallel work, but be having different kind of specific roles and jobs? What would it look like to move this kind of a layer further? And that's a lot of what we're here to discuss today. Is this enough what we're doing, or is there more that we could do to be enhancing the resiliency of our places with the roles that we embody at this moment? I think that's all I want to say on that. My name is Em. I'm based in Seattle. I'm not in Seattle right now. I'm in Twin Falls, Idaho. But for the purposes of our discussion, I'm going to focus on my relationship to Seattle. I'm the executive director for Sustainable Seattle. And since our relationship place changed, I have found myself so in tune. I think more in tune than usual with our weather. I think something that we've been grappling with COVID is that in Seattle, we deal with so much season of gray that when spring comes, we're so excited to go outside and be out in the weather and out in nature. It just feels like that becomes so much more palpable, and I appreciate so much more how important it is to be in public and shared space because of like what the environment is doing around us and because of our seasons. So just seeing and feeling like the shifts in weather, the days that it's rainy, the days that it's sunny, has been something that's continued to really root me with where I am. And I'm going to say that we should go south down the Pacific coast. So that means, and I forgot to mention Teresa too. We normally have Teresa from Portland. Carmen's from Hawthorne, south of LA, and Mariah's from Long Beach. So they're with us in spirit. But next in line is Erica today.
Hi. Hi, I'm Erica. I live in the Bay Area. I work for a community benefit district in San Francisco for a neighborhood called Lower Polk. And I, previous to COVID, was doing my title is art and placemaking manager. So I was able to do really cool events that were focused on art and culture in the neighborhood. Our neighborhood is defined mainly by a network of alleyways that are often cause of some problems, definitely. But it was my job to kind of keep them active and have an alternative. We don't have plazas or any real parks in our neighborhood, so we were looking to these alleyways as public space. And now that ever since COVID, it's been a real struggle to do anything in the alleyways because there's lots of encampments. Our neighborhood has seen a rise of 300% of tents for us in the adjacent Tenderloin neighborhood. So it's been pretty difficult, to say the least. Since then, I've been focusing on how I can help our commercial corridor, help small businesses adjust to the new reality and reopening and what that looks like. I'd say for the prompt, I just was able to go hiking this weekend for the first time. It was like the first time I left my one or like few blocks radius, and it just made me feel sane again. It made me feel human. So I'm so grateful for that. And just beautiful California weather, views of the bay, views of redwoods. I like redwood trees a lot, so that always makes me feel very at home in the Bay Area.
Thanks. I think next down the geography is Minori, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're muted.
You're mute.
Okay, great. Sorry. Okay, my name is Minori. I am based in Los Angeles. I am an architectural designer and CEO of a well-being company. I'm no longer in the nonprofit sector, but I was in nonprofit before. So I can totally relate to a lot of the struggles that all these nonprofits in placemaking is going through, both from nonprofit administration and from architectural point of view. I always think that people are what makes a place, and how they use it, the utility. So living here in downtown LA and seeing how the city emptied out, it's been really fascinating to see like how things really, like the energy of the city completely changed. And we are one of those cities that doesn't have a lot of parks. We are completely urban, and the idea of parks have been getting reintroduced to the city lately. So within my walking distance radius, I have one tiny park and one rather large urban park. And we started walking again last week, and I started noticing how like things, the nature that I didn't realize that was kind of there hidden. And now that the people were gone, it's sort of flourishing. And that was really breathtaking. While I was in school even, and in architecture school, there's this theory that I've been working on called urban fatigue. It's that people who stay in an urban area for too long, they begin to feel exhausted and this huge disconnect with themselves. And typically you can address that by going out to nature. And in crisis, personally, for me, the biggest therapeutic thing is to be able to go and connect with nature so I can connect back to myself very deeply. So this whole situation right now is like a big experiment, and you can begin to see how it impacts people at a very deep level. People are having psychological issues, having a lot of struggles. There are very good things happening, like people are confronted. They have to confront themselves about figuring out what their position is, about how we spend our lives and our relationships to ourselves and to the community and to the earth that we live in, And then on the other hand, this whole thing has catalyzed a lot of internal issues for a lot of people that I'm serving in LA, that I'm noticing that there's been an influx of people reaching out, asking for guidance or like exchanging ideas or wanting to collaborate. And it's really amazing how women are coming together in these times to like help each other. And I don't know if it's like an instinctual thing, but women are banding together, trying to find real solutions, and I'm all here for it. It's amazing. So that's my little spiel, and I'm really grateful to be here and meet all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is so awesome. The reason why I love this group is like I have this overwhelming sense of just like bubbliness and warmth in my body every time we gather, and I'm just like wanting to burst. And when I hear y'all speak. So my name's Casey Munoz. I'm in San Diego, sunny San Diego, and I'm a landscape designer getting my landscape architecture license. And I run my own company. I'm also doing a lot of contract work with a guy that that is very focused on farm and food communities, which is really interesting. Yeah, I want to touch on a couple of things. Like I love that everyone's connecting to nature. You know, that's like so my jam. That's how I, you know, alleviate my own stress and get grounded, and I'm able to just restore. And I think that the sense of place, like Minori said something about what makes or how people make place a place, but I also think like she also alluded to energy and says, you know, there's an energy and the energy's shifted so much. And I had this conversation with a friend recently, and I'm like, you know, I don't think it's always people that makes a place. Like it's energy. And like sometimes you could be in the redwoods and kind of have that like, whoa, there's something else here feeling. And then it's kind of makes that sense of place. Anyway, just wanted to respond to that because I was like connecting the dots across. But let's see, what is keeping me rooted and reminds me of where you are? It's interesting. I kind of have two responses to this, and I'll keep it short. One is what keeps me like where I am and rooted is gardening. So I've definitely been tapping into more gardening, like saving seeds, just getting that sort of like grounded element. Of course, in San Diego, you would think like, I feel like the city is only at 100th of its potential, just perfect weather year round. And yet our outdoor spaces and public open spaces are so not where they should be. And the other thing was I've seen a lot more people walking in the neighborhood because they've been forced to stay at home, you know, and I'm actually starting to feel like my neighborhood has more of an identity because they're not just like getting out and going away and like, and there's an interesting vibe here. I guess maybe it depends on where you live. So I'm sort of enjoying like seeing people out and being like, hey neighbor, hi, like trying to talk with everybody. But yeah, I'm going to stop there because I could go on and on.
I just want to jump in really quick before we go to the rest of our introductions. Another one of our colleagues, Tyler, is not able to be here today, but that point that you just brought up, Casey, is one that Tyler has mentioned a lot too, of because of staying at home, being, you know, people taking walks for their exercise in their neighborhood, people maybe connecting or meeting neighbors that they haven't met previously. And I just wanted to get kind of a finger on the pulse. Have others, I feel like there's been two really vastly different ways. I think it was maybe a day or two after he brought that up, I saw or was part of another conversation that was about how people felt like they were afraid of their neighbors. And these are two like really different ways of understanding neighborhood and relationships to the people that we live with and around. And I just wanted to get a quick pulse on like, have other folks felt the same way? Have you noticed the same things that Casey's been bringing up? Or have you felt feelings of, oh, I actually feel further from my neighbors than I did before this all started? Maybe just one or two responses, or we can just pass if no one really fits with that.
Personally, for me, I feel a little further because I've lived in the same house since I was born here, so for about 24 years now. So me and all of my neighbors are family. We celebrate holidays together. We have barbecues together. And so I've grown up with them and they've watched me grow up. And a lot of them now are a little bit older, so I've had to distance from them just to be safe. So actually in this time, I've never felt further from my neighbors, but I hear the reoccurring theme from most people that they're getting to know their neighbors. So that kind of warms my heart a little bit because neighborhoods are, at least for me, neighbors are really important and a part of my community.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yeah, I've definitely had a lot more interaction with my neighbors now than I ever have before, which has been really nice. But that's like my immediate street. As soon as I get onto another block, it's like I noticed this the first week when everything was shutting down, that people, it's just like it's so disheartening and sad to like be walking towards someone and then they just like go out into the middle of the street. And I know why that has to happen, but it's still just like, this sucks.
Yeah. One thing that's been interesting that I've seen in my neighborhood is people have been marking the space in a way that they may not have otherwise. So since there's not as much like vehicular traffic, for example, there's about a half block away, someone painted, like chalk painted on the ground. So it's more permanent than just sidewalk chalk. Hank's half court. So someone named Hank is in my neighborhood. And then someone added to it another name that I can't remember off the top of my head, but now it's like someone else's full court. So we've got Hank's half court and someone else's full court. And we've been orienting our neighborhood based on like, oh, did you go through Hank's? Or did you go the other way? So it's been this interesting way that we don't know them. And obviously like we've had to keep our distance when we pass by them, but there's been this like little layer of visibility of who some of our neighbors might be. I'd like to go around and continue some of our introductions. I posted a little order in the chat box. So that order, just to keep things flowing, is Natalie, Jack, Jamila, Lace, and Vibhuti. And I see that Jasmine just joined as well. So again, the prompt is just to say your name, where you are, if you want to share your occupation or your role, but you don't have to. And then what is something that's been reminding you or keeping you rooted in place? Again, just a quick time check. We're usually scheduled to go till 4:45. So we'll have about 15, 20 minutes of discussion once we finish introductions. Natalie, take it away.
Yes. Hello, I'm Natalie. I am an operations strategist at Sustainable Seattle. I'm also just finishing up a contract role with another nonprofit, Conservation Northwest, and work at a wellness facility, Northwest Cryotherapy. So dabble in a few different things here. I'm coming from Auburn, Washington. I've moved back home for a little bit. I have a place in Seattle, but I'd rather shelter in place with family. So I'm in Auburn again. To go off the prompt, living in Auburn, I live on a little over an acre. And so something that's kind of rooted me to remind me of where I am is the wildlife on my property. I've seen more ducks, coyotes, bunnies than I ever have in my entire life. So it's just kind of nice to be at home in a really beautiful location. Now that we've had our first bit of nice weather, the flowers are all blooming. So it's been really relaxing just to work at home and feeling really grateful that I have a safe place to work with a beautiful view.
Hi everyone, I'm Jack. I do communications with Sustainable Seattle. I'm in Seattle as well, and recently have been feeling really connected to place by noticing how lush everything's been as we've gotten a little bit more rain recently. It's feeling very spring here, and I finally got out into a forest for the first time in 2 months, and the ferns were popping. So it's just been like very lush and green, and my allergies are, I'm suffering from the allergies, but otherwise loving it, and just excited for warmer weather.
Hi everyone, this is Jamila. I'm one of S2's board co-chairs. In my day job, I do marketing and communications at Planned Parenthood. And something that has been keeping me grounded and rooted, pun intended, has been gardening and being outside, hands in the dirt and, picking up worms and things like that. And also just being outside in our yard. We've been able to meet neighbors who are out walking. And so it's been really nice. And the sunshine has been really great.
Lace, are you here still? We might have lost Lace. So Vibhuti, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Welcome. Oh, and then
yeah.
and then Lace will follow you up.
Oh, okay, sure. I can go then. Hi everyone, it's great to be on this group. I apologize, my video is not working, otherwise I would have loved to turn that on. I very recently moved to Seattle, and I moved from New York, and I'm looking, I was looking to, find a group or like a group of people who have similar interests as mine. Thank you. Who have similar interests as mine. And to be very honest, I didn't know coming into this call about what this group is about. So it's actually great to learn about placemaking. And thanks, Em, for sharing that definition, because I wasn't sure what that was. But it just sounds like a great concept, because I have this, like really high appreciation for parks, especially for people who live in cities. Just personally, I think it transports you to a different space, and it has like such potential to change your mood. And I had recently in New York attended a talk by the guy who designed the architect who designed the 9/11 memorial, and he also stressed so much on the need for parks, especially in like a place like New York, because it's a place where people can congregate and meet, and how important it is. So that really stressed that for me. So it was great to hear a little bit about everyone's interest here. To be honest, like I just moved to Seattle, so I don't necessarily have like a great connection to the place yet. But in New York, like a lot of folks who spoke here just recently started going out, and I got a chance to go to Central Park for a little bit before I moved, and that was great, like for me. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Look forward to listening to everyone's introductions.
Welcome. And yes, I'm so glad. I realized that I forgot to do the introduction to what placemaking is, so I'm glad that was helpful. One of the things that I really value about this sector is that, we have in our group people who are working on community development, people who are architects, people who work in permaculture, people who are artists, and we all kind of convene around this relationship of how do we make place together through urban designing, but also just through community participation. So that's one of the things I also really value, is kind of how interdisciplinary and intersectoral this work is. Jasmine and Tyler, if you would like, we're just doing little introductions. We're saying our names, where we're located, and something that's happened recently that's helped us feel connected to place. Oh, and Lace, sorry, I didn't mean to skip you. I know you were battling with your...
It's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Lace Lawrence, and I'm a contract grant writer. I work with Sustainable Seattle and a few other nonprofits. So lately things have been a bit chaotic as a grant writer, responding to kind of all of this. So the thing that's been grounding me to place is I live in Falls City, which is about a half an hour, 40 minutes outside of Seattle. It's a really small town, kind of up in the woods. And unfortunately for me right now, when the trails opened up, that means that everybody from Seattle is on the trails all the time, because people aren't working as much. And so I've become kind of obsessed with this new Forest Service wilderness area that I discovered that's like 10 miles from my house, that I've never explored before, that has a lot of undeveloped trails and actually some still skiing opportunities. So it's been this really kind of amazing gift that I've overlooked for 10 years, going further and further to get more trails where there aren't people. And now I'm discovering something in my backyard. So that's kind of what's anchoring me here and why I live here, that these beautiful things that surround me are still wilderness right outside my back door.
I've been trying to go out a little more in my neighborhood and trying to go out more on runs. And in the past, I usually would just like kind of go the routes that I knew and like, take the trails that I know. But recently, kind of with everything going on, I'm just like trying to be very intentional about taking weird turns and just like going places I haven't gone before. And I just love sort of that sort of hyper local exploration where I'm like in a dead end and I can see something that like I've lived in the same neighborhood for years but haven't even seen before. And just experiencing like the seasonality of everything, you know, flowers blooming, springtime, you know, birds chirping, all that good stuff, just kind of right outside my backyard. I think that's like some of the most like sort of the best nature you can really experience ultimately.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I am the RISE facilitator with Sustainable Seattle, but I'm also a business owner, a research artist, a filmmaker here in Seattle, but originally I'm from Canada. Let's see, something that's been connecting me to place. I love what Tyler just said. I feel very like similar. I love to go out. I used to hate running, but now I like running all of a sudden because I feel like the the speed has changed, and so I need more speed in my life, and running is a great way to do that. But especially what's connecting me to like feeling like at home or like exploring something new in my home is taking my my camera out and like trying to record like little snippets of life around me that I might not have cared about or thought about before, like going deep into the like the inside of a flower or like looking into the trees, you know, with the lens and being able to see things that I wouldn't have seen before really helps me to feel grounded and rooted right now.
Thank you guys. Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. I just wanted to just like briefly pop in. So we're at about 3:40. M, I will say, not for spoilers, M has prepared some fabulous questions, but it might take us a little bit beyond our time limit. Our people, I want to just take a quick poll and see if people are okay hanging out for a little longer. And you're welcome to come and go as you need. But there is more. So, and also another heads up, I will have to disappear. You'll see me disappear at 4, but keep going, do your thing. Yay, stoked. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks, Una. Yeah, we want to honor people's time. Okay, great. Thanks, Rudy. So we'll just plunge into the discussion. And we always tend to, when this group meets, we're always like, yeah, we'll meet for about an hour. And then like 2.5 hours later, we're like, I'm hungry, I have to have dinner. But we could just talk like all day long. So, and this is such a cool group of people. I'm sure it'll be the same. So we'll start, I think, with some of the heavy topics, the ones we really wanted to touch on, and then just see where and for how long the conversation goes. And just thank you in advance all for joining us. If you are interested, I have to do this little plug. In the kind of work that Sustainable Seattle does, please take a look at our membership program. We have just initiated a new membership program this year. If you don't mind popping a link in there, that would be helpful to me. Thanks, Una. And our membership program is really specifically designed to foster community, to foster a deeper understanding of sustainability in our region, and to create a meaningful relationship to others who are passionate about this work in the community, as well as to be able to have access to some really vibrant and beautiful materials to kind of show off and align with resources like really cool t-shirts or artwork or other assets that we have built out of our relationship with community. So please join and become a member of Sustainable Seattle, or pop us like $5 or $15 or $50 or whatever you can afford so that we can keep doing this work. I have asked all the participants, I gave them a bunch of questions and asked them to pick one of them to focus in on. So we're just gonna start there. The prompts that I gave were, what new ideas, thoughts, or initiatives have you participated in or observed in your specific geography? How has meeting with this group compared with your day-to-day experience in your own community? What common themes have you noticed from our conversations? Imagine you're speaking to yourself in the distant future, 10 years, so not super distant, but relatively distant with what we're dealing with right now, and anticipating a similar catastrophic event. What advice do you give yourself? And finally, do you have a significant lesson you've learned over the past few weeks, or a significant issue that just hasn't left you alone? So just pick one of these to respond to, And these were all kind of came from this idea, from our lens specifically, of resiliency and resiliency relative to place and space with folks who are working in this area every day. So that's what I'd like to open up. Erica, Minori, Casey, if anything's coming up for you off the bat. Well, what you said before we jumped on this call, maybe to start things out, was that these prompts gave you a lot of food for thought. Which were the ones that really jumped out to you, and why did they give you so much thought?
Yeah, I want to go because I'm like bursting. But this is going to be conversational, right? Like we could have our mics off and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think just everything that everyone touched on was like nature, right? Like that's such a common theme. And one of the ideas, because every time I look around neighborhoods and cities, I notice the landscapes like immediately. And one thing that has come out of this is like food, right? Like now we have like this whole new approach to like waiting at the grocery store and understanding food scarcity, or if that's even a thing, right? Like, and I just feel like cities, especially like San Diego, why I mentioned, I think it only is really like taking advantage of its weather and its climate and everything about it to a very, very small degree. Because I feel like these landscapes that connect neighborhoods to parks, to each other, to schools, to civic spaces, to places of gathering can be productive landscapes. And that meaning like adding a tree program or having them be like pollinator pathways or edible landscapes, you know? And I think people, for one, gather when they're comfortable. So that includes like being in shady areas, a place that feels safe, and oftentimes landscapes can help do that. Trees can help do that. And people also like our common like need is food, right? So everyone needs to eat, and I think as some people may be getting closer to their communities, and some people I don't know. I think there's like recipe exchanges I see going on, and I think having these spaces that like every neighborhood has a school. Maybe every school should be a farm. Maybe every church, if it has like an excess amount of land, should also be a farm. Maybe we should just be growing a whole lot more food and having these also like habitat corridors of native plantings connecting us and really capitalizing on our public open space. So that's something I've been thinking a lot, and it keeps coming up. And every time I'm walking the dog and I pass by a school in a neighborhood, and almost every neighborhood, at least in San Diego, I'm speaking for San Diego, almost every neighborhood has a school, because oftentimes, you know, access and being close to a fresh, healthy food source is a big issue. But if you're utilizing those spaces to then alleviate that issue, it might just like be a small step in it, but might have profound impact that we don't even know yet. That's my spiel.
You're reminding me of, there was once that I was outside of a gas station, and it was this kind of grody industrial area, but there were these huge planters, and I thought they had herbs in them. Like from a distance, it looked like basil and oregano, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. They're planters in this, I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere in the world. I have no idea. And I thought it was so cool that they had like herbs in these planters at this gas station. But it was not herbs, it was weeds that had just like sprung up there because they had not been maintained. But that idea of like edible landscaping, as we like advocate for green space and advocate for public shared green space and things like that, to actually build food reciprocity into that landscape design, and especially I think local foods. Yeah, I haven't seen that before.
That, and to speak to, really quick, speak to like us honoring the land of like, you know, who was here, whose land this is there's a lot of things considered weeds that are medicinal, that are edible. Like there's this whole connection there, you know, so it doesn't have to look kind of one way when we think about it. There's other ways of looking. Sorry, Lace.
No, that's okay. I was just going to jump in and say a few years ago, I traveled through Slovenia for like 2.5 weeks, and that is a part of their culture. So all of their planters, all of their parks, all of that has herbs and squash and fruit and vegetables, and it is there for community consumption. It blew my mind. I was like, that's a squash. Why is that in a planter? And they were like, well, then when they're squashed, you can just have it for your take it home, or you can just put these herbs in your like lunch. And I was like, this is amazing. So it's really cool when it's done, and it totally is possible. And I would absolutely love to see that everywhere in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Nice.
I think one of the things that I have come to really appreciate, even through our discussions, is that how important connection is to ourselves and to the community around us. Like, now that we've been deprived of actual human touch, the tactile relationships, it's brought up all these things that was sort of like lost in the day-to-day busy, in your normal life. So I feel like this brought up a good opportunity for us to see that we are not other than of our nature. I don't know if I'm articulating it correctly. Like, we are a part of nature. So to think of ourselves as this really integral part of this huge system, and we are not outside of it. It's not something that we can control and manipulate and mold to our needs, but we have to figure out now how to exist within this ecosystem so that we can uplift everything. And I think it's a very good opportunity for us to all step up and like really step into the role that we have been given to become stewards of this earth, like stewardship. So I think for me, that's a huge takeaway. I mean, we know it, I think, but like this thing brought it front and center. Like, we cannot be outside of that.
Well, I totally agree with that. And the nature of this thing itself is that it supposedly it jumped from animals to humans, as if we are separate from nature, as if we were never like connected to that. But it's like, and you see that utilized to just be horribly racist against like the Chinese people for having wet markets, when it's just like, who are you to say that we are outside? This is something that is outside of nature, that we shouldn't be like, and just the nature, we're stuck in our homes. Everything outside is dangerous. It's just, yeah, it's really interesting.
I was just gonna pop in here and say, it's really interesting I've been just thinking about the survey that I posted, and at first I was like, maybe this isn't related, but I've just been thinking about, as you guys speak about like our concept of danger, like neighborhood danger, right? Like, we have all these ideas of like bad neighborhoods, like even before COVID, like things like that. And like, what does it mean in our cities to have these ways of qualifying neighborhoods? Like, what is it? You know what I mean? What are the things about those neighborhoods that make them these ways? And I think to an extent, like, we know, like, frequently, like, there's like redlining, right? And like impoverished neighborhoods, like historically Black neighborhoods, things like that. But really thinking about like when we value our neighborhood, like our personal neighborhood, what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? And I think I've just been thinking about that a great deal more, and that's been really nagging me, that I'm like, am I also going to snap back to not paying attention to my neighbors, to not knowing where I am, to not spending time in my yard, to not walking just on my street, because I'm going to be so relieved to get away, when things lift? Like, what does that mean about how I actually think about where I am? Like, yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot.
I think that's a real cool point. And I think this, for me, when you were talking about it, it's like it goes back to that connection. Like, if we think about our neighborhoods as like, this is my neighborhood, it's my people, my land that I have to take care of, like my environment, does that change the attitude that you have? Like, how much care you put into something?
I wonder if it's because we're also like transient. Like sort of generationally, like people kind of stay in a place only for a few years, and so there's not that sense of like grounding.
Yeah.
There's this very interesting, I don't know if anybody who was not born in the US here, one of the things that I noticed, like back at my home in Sri Lanka and my husband's home in Portugal, is that people, like when they build a house, they stay there. In the US, we build a house that's a step up home to another different house. And then we don't retire in the same house. So we've designed buildings to suit different, like 10, 15 years of our life, maybe. Like for architecturally, I found like that blew my mind, like, why do we do that? Like if I build a house one day, I want to age that, So this sense of like, I'm only here temporarily. I wonder if it's like an ethos coming from that like Western philosophy of like, oh, you're just here for a little bit and then you're gone,
Yeah.
Like you don't have a relationship that sort of stays in the long run. Like, I don't know if it's like religious or philosophical, but I found it like profound that we limit ourselves to that transient condition and we don't think about the consequences before or after.
That kind of reminds me, I've had like so many thoughts just come up already, but one is that I've been thinking, I'm going to try to pull this together, about not only our relationship and proximity to each other, but our relationship to other people through time. So I saw an article, I think it might have been one, Erica, that you shared, and we'll see if we can pull it up and put it and drop it in the chat. And I was only able to skim it, but it was talking about these new tactics for placemaking in a time of social distancing, and these like loops that have been put, like it was like these hula hoop looking things that were put out in a field so that people could, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. San Francisco spray painted big circles in like our parks just to make sure that people would stay in their little circle.
But when people stay in their circle, somebody else who comes into that circle has had a temporal relationship with the person who just left. So even if you're 6 feet away from the people next to you, you're still close to the people who were there before you.
Right.
And I'm just thinking about that in terms of what Minori has just brought up, in terms of like, how do we, and you're also making me think about the kinds of luxury housing developments that we have coming up all over in Seattle, and I think kind of all over the place right now, that are really designed for ambitious young people entering competitive markets.
Right.
Yep.
And they're not meant to be places that you live in and die in. They're meant to be places that are focused on a generational audience, not necessarily an intergenerational audience, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So like it's housing that's designed for people in their 20s who are emerging their careers, not housing that's designed for grandparents, parents, children, or even like different types of family structures, like collective families or things like that.
I wonder if that calls for like a paradigm shift of how we raise the next generations, like what are the values that we are teaching these next generations to go behind? Is like when we are putting our thoughts out there, whether be it like a book or manifesto, even just putting out ideas into the world, do we want to reinforce the current structure that's existing, or do we want to challenge that and get people to really think like, if we are a part of the nature, how would we really live our lives to in a sustainable way that we can be in harmony with everything around us, that like economic gains are not the only thing that we are chasing, that there are the things that like relationships, and these connections that we have to nature. Would we plan communities and cities differently? So, but for these things to happen, for these solutions to come and be embraced, people have to like want that. So we have to change the perception of the needs so that these new ideas can actually take root, I feel like. What do you guys think?
I also think, like, do people know, like you said, do people want that? It's also like, do people know what opportunities exist. You know, like I work on a lot of projects, like I was mentioning, that are farm focused, and it's interesting because the developments are called like village design, agri design, and they're designed to age in place. So you have like a multitude types of housing, different densities. You know, the person who gets the starter home that or whatever here can also move into the bigger home over there. So it's still like it's this thing that's been a concept for 60 years, but it hasn't really taken root in the way that we do our current planning, because it really, really, really stresses preserving 50% of the land for open space and for food development, and having like a super hyper local thing. It's becoming more popular, and it's sort of taking over the concept of the golf course community. However, the thing that I'm still seeing is it's still like certain people going into these communities. It's not as inclusive or as diverse as like they, you know, yet as maybe that it's projected as, but it's also like new development that's happening away from the city because people want to connect to nature, but it's close enough to get to the city. And then I always keep thinking about, but like there's all of this that exists, and it's not even like, it's like, it still could use some love, you know? So thinking about, yes, that how to inform, like, and I think Una was saying it about, like, you know, when you get into a neighborhood and you like, what is it? What are those things that make it like safe versus unsafe, or make it one way versus another? And I think it goes back to like policy and, you know, city planning and zoning and all of these neighborhoods. You know, you go into one that has old growth trees and you're instantly calmed, and you know, like it's been there a long time because those trees are 50 years old. And then you go into a neighborhood that has no trees and wide streets and no sidewalks, and you know, that's, you just get this like kind of, so I don't know, I'm on a little bit of a spiral here, but yeah, I think there's informing how development can go in, like the direction it could go into, and all of these values and this manifesto that may guide it, and showing people that they could demand it, and like the opportunities that exist not only within their existing infrastructure, but in new infrastructure.
Got thinking. Sorry, Erica, go ahead.
It just reminds me of actually, you showed that video of AOC's video illustrated by Molly Crabapple of what the Green New Deal could look like. And it's just like, it's showing it in action. It's showing that there is another way. We need to tell that story as like cultural workers. We need to be the ones making those illustrations and just giving people like a view into what else is even possible, and making them want it. You know, like, I want that future of sustainable development. Because yeah, I have a quote that Casey, I shared this architect's book with you, Carolyn Steele.
Oh yeah,
She talks about, she's on this podcast called At a Distance, which I highly recommend. She's talking about this moment in terms of the climate, and she goes, we're at a crossroads. Think about it like a railroad track. The train was going really rapidly in one direction, and it just looked certain to carry on despite everything that Greta Thunberg was saying. Now there's an absolute pause, and the train has ground to a halt. There's a set of points up ahead, and we can either flip them left or right, and that is going to determine the future of our species. I just like got chills when I read that, or when I heard it. I had to write it down, and I just remembered that I had it in my notes.
Ooh.
Right?
Would you mind typing it and sharing it in the chat?
Yeah.
Cool.
Can I add something? So one of the things that I've noticed in my years of reaching out to different communities is I've done like classes for people who are experiencing poverty and stuff like that before. And, you know, coming from a country that's like a developing country, I realized one of the things that I had before that I didn't even like couldn't even think of, imagine before I moved to the States and had this kind of life that I'm having now, is that this like mental space availability to think about some of the bigger problems in the world. You know, like you're so consumed with survival, like you don't have the space to think about long term, or you have the capacity to absorb all this information. Like right now, I feel so blessed to be able to be immersed in conversations where I can educate myself and give myself all of that, you know, tools to be able to handle everything, and not, you know. So I'm wondering, and one of the things that I want to do with my architecture practice and my well-being practice is that, like, I really feel like community building at a very fundamental level of making people feel safe so that they have the mental ability to educate themselves and participate in these conversations would change the game so much. I feel like, you know, that's one of the things that keeps me motivated and driven to engage in stuff like this, because we know we can do it. It's just figuring out how to do it in a sustainable way.
I want to give a little chance, now that we've kind of had some discussion, this like group of friends, some of the other folks who are listening in. I think everybody on the chat, so I see little connections. But I'm wondering if anyone else wants to volunteer themselves, things that have been really resonant. Thanks, Jack. Or things that that are coming up for you. And if you don't, that's fine too. But just know that you're welcome to join in the conversation at any time. But we'll keep yammering because we're here.
Is it too late or too early for a tequila? No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right? I'm an hour later in the time zone, so it's not too early. It's 5:03. Something that's I'm kind of like back. Cool, thanks, Minori. Well, maybe since we're kind of in like a natural break in the conversation, we can come back to this question of like, do we need to do something with this kind of relationship that we've forged? You know, I think we're all coming from these really different technical backgrounds and these different geographic backgrounds, but we have these threads that are, you know, we'll have to translate things to be local to our own contexts. But there are also ways I think that we can create frameworks together to try to do something with this moment or with this work. Let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
I'm like automatically looking at the designers because they're
yeah. I mean, I have like a bunch of programs I want to get implemented.
You know, when we talked about this offline, Casey, a lot of the stuff that Casey has put in is like super tactical. Like, I want to do these things in my neighborhood. I want to build the edible gardens. I want to design for that. Maybe that's really where we need to go. Like, maybe some of the options we've thrown around is like, can we just like put our ideas forward in like a kind of mini manifesto of sorts? Can we, you know, just archive these themes that have come up through like a zine? Can we create a toolkit or a toolbox that people could use in different communities? Or is it like a material project that happens? Like, do we bypass all of that and just like all agree like, yeah, we need more edible public space? Let's take a field trip to Slovenia.
Yeah, well, like, I like that. The idea of like archiving, but also I'm such a big believer. I think when Nori was saying like, you know, really being at a fundamental level and like doing community building, you know, at a very fundamental level and making people feel safe, and, you know, how does that look? And I'm such a big believer in doing in order to learn. And that might not be the right way. I don't know, but
no,
it's just like
say the same thing.
yeah, it's like doing the tactical things and on a small level, and then you can like you could think bigger, you know?
Our training is that we always iterate. So the first moment you said that was like, let's do small pilots and see what could stick in what locales, because we know, right? Context matters. It's like where you are, the weather's different than somewhere else, the community reception is different. So there are so many factors. So based on these things, if we can come up with a list of things that we want to do for our individual area, and then do tiny little pilots to see what works. And I don't think we should be doing one or the other things. I think we should be doing all of these things that you read out, and like coming out with a manifesto, and like, you know, having a zine, having a way of archiving, because this is knowledge and the knowledge needs to get passed down somehow. So I think doing these little pilots, like spending the time to come up with the individual things we want to do with our communities, and doing the little pilots and documenting the results, and like, you know, having these conversations to talk about what works and what doesn't work. For me, that is a way that I feel really comfortable working on, because it's like there's the feedback loop of always going back and iterating, you know.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot. Like, we can all be talking about one, like we're all going to do one to, like, we'll start like one project that each of us can bring back to our communities. And we just in real time see what happens and how it works out, and stay connected in that way. And then we can go to the Creative Placemaking Summit and present that. But no, really, like I was thinking, like I think about the question that was in the prompt about what themes keep coming up.
Yeah.
And all of those themes and the things that all came up, you know, we've been discussing how COVID has affected each and every one of those themes. So whether it's like, I have, and this is just like my really quick 5-minute, like, what do we talk about? Technology and our relationship to technology, and how these tools are helping us get our jobs done where we didn't need before. The failures of capitalism, this is my personal favorite.
Yeah.
So the failures of capitalism plus my relationship to productivity in those discussions that we've talked about, and how this has been such a wake-up call and a really hard moment to be like, I'm not being productive. Oh my God, I'm a waste of a paycheck right now. You know, like it's been so difficult in those terms. And I think exploring that in some sort of narrative form would be interesting. So what else do I have? I've public space, obviously, design, urbanism, workplace issues, and the fact that we're all women. I think that we talk about being women in this work right now. Yeah, and how all of those things are affected by COVID. I think like a little snapshot into those chapters, and adding more, obviously, if I left any out, would be interesting too.
I mean, to play on the like capitalist thing or the financial thing, I love that bartering is like full on.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
people are appreciating each other's skills, or maybe what they might have extra of and they could share. There's definitely like the sharing economy and the bartering economy that's come to light, and it's been really nice.
The millennials are having a moment with this, because these things with like bartering and all, they were already using technology to do all of that. And now the rest of the world is sort of like embracing like Zoom, you know, Venmo, all of these things that the kids were using. And it's great. I think like there's always better hope with the generations to come, because they always get smarter with how they deal with issues, you know. So yeah, but I gotta go. This is so enticing to stay here and talk. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Minori.
I love the way she talks.
I know.
I'm like, if she could just like articulate for me, that would be cool.
I want her to like read me books on tape. Like her voice to me, like she's one of my best friends. Her voice to me is just like so comforting whenever I need to talk to her. Yeah, I'm glad.
So intentional.
Yeah.
I'm just going to summarize a little bit of what I've heard. And unfortunately, I was like having a little bit of issues with my notes, so I didn't get to capture everything that was being said, especially between Minori. Yeah, Minori was just like, I feel like tying everything together. But really saying that it's, you know, this idea of being iterative, but also not deciding which one thing are we doing, but it's kind of doing all of them. So it's doing the archiving and the doing together at the same time.
Yeah.
And probably what our next conversation will be is like, okay, what does that look like? And let's map it out a bit. And I think, Erica, you've done a lot of good groundwork for us by just like kind of jotting down the themes that have come up for you that we can just add to. And maybe build a little structure of, you know, nothing that's too big or too overwhelming, something that is iterative. Like the archiving can be iterative as well as the projects can be iterative.
Right.
Right. So breaking it down into bite-sized pieces and just saying like, okay, yeah, we have seen these themes come up. And you did such a stellar job of, you know, pulling all of those conversation pieces out. Thank you so much for doing that. All those, I was like, oh yeah, we had that whole week where we just talked about like productivity.
Yeah.
That meant to us. And then I think as we contextualize all of these things with our roles, like the things we're being asked to do out in the world, which have to do with like making safe and resilient and vital spaces, you know, each of those will kind of like weave themselves together. Something I've been thinking about a lot really for the last year, but I haven't yet taken action on, is this idea of what is our role individually, and how do we not think of ourselves individually as a player in this work, but how do we see ourselves as like puzzle pieces fitting together? This idea first came up to me when I was talking to someone at the conference I was at right before I went to our first placemaking conference, where we were talking about the idea of disaster and like what happens when a disaster strikes, and assigning ourselves these archetypal roles. Like when the apocalyptic event happens, will you be the medic? Will you be the, you know, the person with the loudspeaker? Will you be the bell ringer? Will you be the looter? Like, you know, and each of those kind of being an essential role in that moment, and something that's like an aspect of society and that's revelatory about society. And I've been thinking about, is there maybe something that we can do to, because the other thing that's come up for me in this conversation is we're talking a lot about our paradigms, our value systems, our individual roles, but these are also really systemic. You know, Casey, you brought up policy. It's been on my mind a lot, this idea of how much onus and responsibility we put on the individual, when the truth is the individual can only do so much. Like major industrial and systemic overhaul. The easiest example of that is you can blame someone for littering, or you can blame a manufacturer for producing a wasteful item, for making trash in the first place. If we don't have trash in the first place, we don't have litter. So but like, those systemic changes are not going to happen overnight. I think we have to be so tactical, and you can't just say like, well, screw it, we're all going to litter in the meantime.
Right.
So to me, one of the things I've been trying to process through to make that more digestible is maybe being more intentional about like naming my own archetypal role in this. My role is the medic, or my role is the bell ringer, or whatever it might be. But then also understanding who my network is, and kind of more clearly knowing like, okay, if I'm not the medic, who in my network is.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I love the archetypal role.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I'm sorry, I'm like on podcast binge right now. Everything's in a podcast. Brene Brown, who I love so much, was just talking to someone in her podcast about who we, like, who we are in crisis. Are we the person that takes charge and just has to do everything, and that's how they process the crisis, or a person that just is like terrified and like freezes? And actually, that it's not. She has anecdotal evidence about just like if you were the elder sibling, you're more likely to take charge and be that person. And if you were a younger sibling, you grew up with older siblings like kind of doing things for you or fixing things for you, or and so I ask, I feel through this, I'm like, oh, I'm the frozen one, aren't I? And I'm a little bit disappointed in that, but it's at least naming it to know how to address it, I guess, moving forward. And that I think is similar to the archetypal, like who we are in this moment.
Yeah, I think Minori was saying it too, where it's like you're confronting like so many people have had to confront themselves and like go a little deeper in that sense. And I love that. I think that helps us to connect better with others too. But and I think, like what does a process look like and all of that. And I think it's sharing, like just doing this, sharing so people can be invited into the conversation and like when people are able to participate and like provide insight in other ways, it just opens up the portal, right? Like we get a better understanding of what's going on and like what the challenges are, whatever may be being addressed. But I think it's just like layered. It's like sharing, getting people to understand how they could participate. It's so it doesn't have to be an individual endeavor. And then understanding, like, I think it's always nice to understand how can I participate. Like there's so many things I want to participate in. And when I don't understand like exactly where I could be of support, then, it's you sort of like, okay, well, I'll check in later. Like you want to, but so I don't know what that means for us. Like I think I know what it means for us as a group, but I don't know what that means from like an extended point, but something to think about.
Yeah. And I think something that I'll do after we wrap this conversation and, we'll share it with our networks at S2. So we'll archive it, but we'll also continue to have it be open and invite anybody else if they have ideas or desires or anything like that to kind of ask of the Placemaker crew. That would be so valuable too, so that we're not just trapped in our bubble. That said, I think that we are such a generative and productive group and can also trust ourselves. So we can be semi-permeable. That's the earlier. And I'm going to look to, when it comes to like, what do we do with this? I'm going to look to those with Virgo in their charts.
She's like, yes.
Does that get me off the hook then? Just kidding.
Man, I can't remember if I have Virgo in my chart. Did I?
You. I remember.
Oh, okay. Me and you, Erica. It's you and me, right?
Wait, Erica, what are your...
Oh, God, I looked it up after we talked. I had to ask my mom when I was born. That was what she's like, why? I was like, because astronomy.
Astrology.
Or, yeah, sorry. There you go. I'm Cancer. I think something is in Leo and something is, I don't know. I don't remember. Sorry.
Oh, will be important.
No, that's funny because I thought she was pointing to you and she was pointing to me.
We got some good balance. We got some water, we got some fire, we got some earth.
Yeah, totally.
Good balance. That's been one of our themes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has, like, this group has been such a lifesaver for me, or like a lifeline, or like a way to stay grounded in all of this. And even when like I'm like in depression and I'm just like, I don't want to go on it, I'm like, I've forced myself to, and I'm like, I always feel better after. I always feel like seen, heard, not judged, which has been, yeah, it's been great, because there's always a fear of like, oh, I'm meeting with this group of such amazing, talented, capable women, and like, who am I, you know? And it's just, I've never once felt like less than, which is really great. And it's so important to just meet with you guys, for me.
I see the same in you all.
Mm-hmm. Same. And yeah, sometimes I don't want to go on because I'm like, I've been on Zoom, but you know, I think I know I'm in the right spot when I get that heart feeling, you know, when both you and Minori started talking today, I was just like, this is it, man. Like this is just like you're really like beautiful, intentional group. And you're right. It's not judgmental, and it's empathetic, and it's all these things that I think we're all looking for. And so happy to be here.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice note for us to wrap on. I think we got a lot today. I want to give one final invitation for the folks who are listening in. If you want to chat with us, if you want to keep talking with us, we're here. So we're also happy to say goodnight. And if you want to connect with any of the folks who have been on this call, just let me know. I'll make sure that our contact info, you can reach me through the Sustainable Seattle website. My email is m@sustainableseattle.org. Thank you, Lace. Have a great rest of the day. And I will, again, share this with some additional prompts, especially what does the public kind of community want from us as we continue to iterate together. And the other thing that I just popped down is I'd be really curious to know from our community what their lifelines are, or what their groups are. That, you know, we talked a lot at the beginning of this conversation about what grounds us environmentally and in place, but I think Erica has just brought up the fact that we also ground each other, and that's been, I think, just as vital. And that's what all this work is about: is having a relationship with the place and space around us, and having an interpersonal social relationship as well. That it's a both and.
Definitely. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.